He had his gun, so he just swung it open.
I start to notice that, the atmosphere feels a little bit weird.
First thing he seen was this 6.5 foot tall, broad shoulder, dark hair. That freaked him out.
We hadn't talked to her about like life and death and what any of that means. She's 3 years old,
So we turned around. Suddenly there's a whole tree falling across the road.
And she was describing to us that, there was a deceased person that she could see visually.
You're listening to Cryptid Clues, where we tackle the ever-expanding history and mystery of monsters and supernatural madness every Monday. You can find us at CryptidClues.ca for more information, or even check out exclusive content and support us at patreon.com/CryptidClues.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Cryptid Clues. I am your host, Taylor, and today we're going to be diving into some Arkansas Sasquatch reports and just kind of backstory on the area and an affiliation with them. Before we get into that, some housekeeping. These last couple of weeks, we dropped a Dogman Encounters episode on our feeds, some very interesting reports in there. Following that, we released our part 1 of the UAP Congress hearing. Part 2 will be coming next week. Reuben and I just wanted to hold off and wait a little bit because there's a few interesting developments unfolding in that kind of area. But without further ado, let's get into this first encounter. And I quote, "Back in December of last year, I spent a few days at my sister's in rural Arkansas for the holidays. On the 28th, I went for a nature hike and happened upon a quaint little glade on the edge of the Wichita River, where it was a particularly tranquil shade of bluish green. After immortalizing the scene by taking a video, I noticed that decently sized rocks were being moved around from the other side of the river that the water had carved out at least 100 feet away from me. I don't think I properly caught it on camera, but I wish I did. It was as if the rocks were being disrupted by an invisible person. I took note of this strange experience before scaling the hill on my side of the river and venturing a little deeper into the woods. It wasn't long before I began to hear knocking from the area. I'd seen the rocks being moved about, so I began recording once more. The fallen tree laid between a small standing tree in a U-shape. I'm not the most well-versed in cryptozoology, but I have heard of Sasquatch marking their territory through log arrangements, not unlike what I was looking at. It doesn't mean it didn't happen naturally or was propped up that way by a person, but it stood out to me. For a while, the knocking was sparse, happening only at distant intervals, but much later it became more frequent, and I even heard what sounded like tree trunks being snapped. It was a loud crunching noise that happened a few times over. After these crunches, however, the noises stopped outright, and after crouching down for a few more minutes to see if I could capture the source of these sounds on camera, I headed back out of the woods to my sister's house. I remember the walk back being a pretty mortifying experience. Nothing frightening happened on my way out, but the paranoia of the thing causing the knocking and crunching showing up had me on edge till I reached the road at last." End quote. Now, right out of the gate, Arkansas has a long-standing history of Sasquatch sightings that date back to at least 1834. People had originally thought that it was just a man who went wild from the New Madrid earthquake. That earthquake event was a 7.2 magnitude that hit the States, but of course, that's only folklore. There's no concrete proof. I do want to say thank you to the gentleman who sent in this encounter. Additionally, he has provided video footage of his encounter. There's going to be a link available below, but I have inserted here 2 moments that occurred for the listeners just to kind of like hear what was going on. So I'm going to play the first one here, followed by the second one right after.
The way the rocks are stacked and with that log in the tree, I don't know, it just looks kind of strange. Water down here.
So in that first clip, something has definitely triggered his attention. He's kind of like walking up alongside the bank, and he's still quite a distance away from the river. You can still hear it a little bit faintly in the background, but then as he's talking, I'm just looking around him, you hear that noise of something splashing in the river far from him. And then the next clip, he's silent the whole time because now it's starting to pick up. You can hear the splash of another rock. He's much closer to the river this time, and then you can hear these knocks off in the distance, followed by another smash at the very end there. So very interesting stuff. And again, the link to the whole video is down below. It's a full half-an-hour video recording of him just kind of going through this area very slowly, and you can just listen through it and hear the different things. Very, very interesting video. I had a good time watching it. Again, thank you for letting me post it into this episode. But let's discuss the lay of the land a little bit. Now, Arkansas is home to 7 national parks. 7. There's our first red flag. Arkansas is a landlocked state in the south central region of the southern United States. It is bordered by Missouri to the north, Tennessee and Mississippi to the east, Louisiana to the south, and Texas and Oklahoma to the west. Arkansas generally has a humid subtropical climate. While not bordering the Gulf of Mexico, Arkansas is still close enough to the warm, large body of water for it to influence the weather in the state. And generally, Arkansas has pretty hot, humid summers and slightly drier, mild to cool winters. It reminds me of the Pacific Northwest to a degree here. And the plant life varies with its climate and elevation. The pine belt stretching from the Arkansas Delta to Texas consists of dense oak, hickory, pine growth. And then in eastern Arkansas, you can find cypress, water oaks, hickories, and their roots are submerged into the Mississippi Valley. Nearby Crawley's Ridge is the only home of the tulip trees in the state, and generally hosts more northeastern plant life such as the beech tree. Arkansas wildlife is famous for the white-tailed deer, elk, bald eagles. Predators include coyotes, gray foxes, red foxes, bobcats, rodents. There's over 12 mouse species, ground squirrels, southern flying squirrel. Small mammals include river otters, shrews, gophers, rabbits, possums. It's just, aside from possums and a few other things, there's a lot of wildlife here that, again, is very similar to the Pacific Northwest. On a darker note, 200 people have been officially registered missing in Arkansas in the year 2023 so far. And remember, that's only those who are officially registered. And I'm not saying that that's individuals going missing in the wild and national parks. It's just people that have disappeared in the state alone. It could be a plethora of different reasons, but I just thought it was a very interesting number to include. So with the general picture painted, let's touch base again on the first media posting of Bigfoot in the Arkansas state. The first published report in 1846 claimed a footprint was discovered in eastern Arkansas that measured 22 inches. Then jumping ahead 5 years to 1851, the Vermont Watchman and State Journal reported that 2 men were hunting together in Greene County, Arkansas, when suddenly they spotted something bearing the unmistakable likeness of humanity chasing a herd of cattle. I quote, "He was of gigantic stature, the body being covered with hair, and the head with long locks that fairly enveloped his neck and shoulders," end quote. The creature halted and stared at them for a few moments and then ran into a patch of woods. And I quote, "with great speed, leaping from 12 to 14 feet at a time," end quote. The newspaper went on to explain that sightings of the wild men had been reported in St. Francis Green and Poinsett counties since 1834. Let's take a look at the folklore here. You will probably recognize the Boggy Creek Monster title in relation to the movie. Another name used is also the Swamp Stalker. It's reported to be an ape-like creature similar to Bigfoot that was initially allegedly sighted in the rural town of Folk, Arkansas, during the early 1970s. The creature was alleged to have attacked a local family. It has since become a part of Arkansas folklore and has also influenced local culture and folk, with some businesses capitalizing on the local lore. It's very similar to what we do in the Okanagan with Ogopogo, capitalizing on it with the tourists and such. But the home of this local family was Bobby and Elizabeth Ford. Taking place on May 2nd, 1971, Elizabeth reported that the creature, which she initially thought was a bear, reached through their screen window during the night whilst they slept on the couch, and it was chased away by her husband and his brother Don. During the alleged encounter, the family fired off several gunshots at the creature and believed that they had hit it. Though no traces of blood were ever found, an extensive search of the area failed to locate the creature, But 3-toed footprints were found close to the house, as well as scratch marks on the porch and damage to a window and the house's siding. According to the Fords, they had heard something moving around outside late at night several nights prior, but having lived in the house for less than a week, had never encountered the creature before. The creature was allegedly sighted again within the same year and month, May 23rd, 1971, when 3 people, D.C. Woods Jr., Wilma Woods, and Mrs. R.H. Sedgas, reported seeing an ape-like creature crossing U.S. Highway 71. I just want to note here, when these family members, the Fords, moved into this home, and it was just with less than a week that they were occupying it, it just makes me think, okay, maybe this thing did kind of strut around and bang on the house a little bit just to see if there's anyone residing inside. I feel like that is a very common action that they have done in the past, just to kind of see, like in a camper or something along those lines. I have no scientific fact to back up such a claim, but it just seems to be a familiar theme between different encounters that I have personally noticed. I digress, though. Between 1971 and 1974, a plethora of additional reports began flowing in and characterized this entity as a sizable, 2-legged being cloaked in lengthy dark fur. Initial estimates placed its height at approximately 7 feet, just around 2 meters, and its weight between 250 to 300 pounds, 110 to 140 kilograms. Subsequent accounts suggested a much larger scale, with a witness describing it as towering 10 feet, which would be about 3 meters tall, and weighing an approximate 800 pounds, 360 kilograms. Witness testimonies portrayed the folk monster as a swift runner and resembling almost a gallop as it moved, while its arm movements bore resemblance to that of a monkey. A consistent aspect of these reports was the creature's foul odor, likened to a mix of like a skunk and a damp dog smell emanating from when it was present. Now, the creature was often said to possess bright red eyes, comparable in size to a silver dollar. A reoccurring note that I might add here is that Reuben and I have discussed the eyes many, many times. I'm not sure if I would technically throw Mothman into this mix because we simply aren't as knowledgeable on that cryptid, but when you look at Dogman and Bigfoot in comparison, both seem to be prominent, consistent culprits for having red eyes. Let's not forget they are spotted in these sightings with different colored eyes at times, but the red is very, very interesting and prominent, and usually associated with more threatening or intimidating situations. I digress, though. It's just another thing that is common and reoccurring that Reuben and I have taken note of. Numerous tracks and claw imprints were purportedly discovered, attributed to this creature, and among them, one set of footprints reportedly measured 17 inches in length and 7 inches in width. And as mentioned in the initial Ford account, footprints displaying 3 toes. Reuben and I have discussed 3-toed footprints before. I'll have to isolate which episode that was because we did a deep dive into what could actually result that, if it is the source of maybe inbreeding, a lack of a genetic pool due to an amount of them that are in the area. It could be a whole multitude of different things. All in all, though, we're looking at 189 years to date of Sasquatch encounters and information gathered from this state. But we can safely assume that these sightings have been occurring before settlers came into the picture within the state of Arkansas. These could have been happening for hundreds and hundreds of years, as far as I'm concerned. Now, I'm always intrigued to learn of celebrities and their experiences. Notably, Dan Aykroyd, who we've discussed before regarding aliens and Bigfoot, has a good roster of sightings. But did you know Rob Lowe and his sons had a Bigfoot experience as well? The relevance to this is that theirs actually took place in the Ozark Mountains, which stretch out between Arkansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. So, a little more context. If you've seen the show Parks and Rec, you'd recognize him from that as Chris Traeger. The actor has been in many other medias, both film and TV, over the decades. But little did I know he actually did a show called The Lowe Files, releasing in 2017. It unfortunately lasted only 1 season, but this has jumped on my watch list for sure. The show being a non-fiction series, and I quote, takes them across the country to further their passion as they explore and debate mysterious stories and spooky legends. While designed to be fun in spirit, the missions are described by A&E Network as deliberate and scientific investigations on a highly sophisticated level. and include the Lows using advanced monitoring equipment and taking in-depth training courses, end quote. To me, the show sounds wonderful, but I digress. To quote the headline used in many of the articles that covered Rob Lowe's experience, Rob Lowe says he thought he was going to be killed during an encounter with a Bigfoot creature while filming his new A&E docu-series, end quote. So he had reported to Entertainment Weekly that his encounter occurred in the Ozark Mountains, as we stated prior, and that he and his 2 sons were out there camping and investigating the wood ape Bigfoot creature that is reported by the locals. During the shoot, he claims something actually approached their campsite. And at this point, Lowe says that he just immediately was lying on the ground. He was thinking he was going to be killed. And I quote, fully aware that the story makes him sound like a crazy Hollywood kook, end quote. As questionable as it may appear, Lowe stands firm on nothing being faked and admits he doesn't accept every mystery as reality either. Based on my experiences on the show, particularly around ghosts, absolutely, we captured some incredible footage. Nothing is staged, nothing is trick cut, no bullshit. I believe there are probably ghosts out there. The rest of what we found, I accepted on a case-by-case basis, end quote. I like how he's worded that, and that's sometimes how you have to take it, case by case, and just see what is presented to you and make, sometimes it's not always logical, but make a position you can maybe stand on in that scenario with what is presented to you. You're not going to get all the answers, and you're not going to figure it out, but he seems to understand that, and I can respect how he worded that. I wish there was more to it. Now, it sucks that there is a little bit more with that case, but that is all that I could find about his Sasquatch report in detail. He was terrified. He thought he was going to die. He was laying down, and whatever this thing was just kind of like sauntered in, sauntered off. So, in closing, as we near the end of this episode, there's a gentleman from Massachusetts who was out in the folk for a day on the banks of the Sulphur River. They became convinced that Arkansas was home to many Sasquatch, particularly in the western portion, the Wichita National Forest, and southward near the Texas border. The forested areas, mountains, and swamplands in the area where Oklahoma, Texas, and Arkansas meet are probably the next habitat outside of the Pacific Northwest for Sasquatch, and that is in their humble opinion. They stated that. As mentioned before, they weren't in this general area for long, but while they were in the area, they managed to find a print. They claim the trees, swamps, and forests look so ancient, containing a wild atmosphere that you would almost expect to see a Bigfoot reside in this part of the state. This track they mentioned measures in at about 15 inches from big toe to heel. All 5 toes are visible, and I quote, "I'm not going to totally rule out something else, but you can see how well defined the suspected first and second toes are, with ridges in between where the toes would presumably splay. 3 smaller toes are harder to see, but there are hints of ridges between those with clear indentations in front where they would stick out." End quote. With the evidence of tracks and a long-standing history of sightings, I found local groups such as the Alliance of Independent Bigfoot Researchers shedding more light on the topic, including an incredible possible total 3,000 count of Bigfoot sightings in central Arkansas. That is incredible. Faulkner, Pulaski, Saline, Perry counties are very prevalent locations as well for sightings, as is mentioned, as is the area around the aforementioned Folk down in Miller County, including the Boston Mountain area in the northern part of the state. So that's all stuff that's come out of that researcher group. That's just information that they wanted to share. And yeah, it's incredible. And looking at photos of this state, I sympathize more and more with what I mentioned prior. It reminds me of a Pacific Northwest. And it seems to be that what people are seeing is a very close resemblance to that classic Western Sasquatch. When you get to different states and different parts of the world, Sasquatch can change in its appearance, its size, its stature, everything. It will start to look different. So it just seems to be like maybe these creatures are traversing between this large piece of land, whether it is through underground networks or it is somehow up above. I do think it's interesting that you have these mountain ranges that could be used, but at the same time, I don't put it past it to have underground, unexplored cave networks that flow underneath these mountain ranges. But I don't have scientific evidence to back such a claim. Anyways, I am rambling now. Just like that, this episode is done. I hope you enjoyed it. Always a good time to dive back into Bigfoot. Reuben and I will be back next week with our part 2 of the UAP Congress hearing. But until then, you can find us on our social media channels, Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. We're also available at CryptidClues.ca. And should you wish to reach out to us directly, you can via CryptidClues@gmail.com. Don't forget to check out that video down below and the details. And until next time, everyone, take care and stay safe.